Well, here we are. The final part of our deep dive into Doran's work on the psychology of AI and search. I mean, we've covered so much ground already, haven't we? All those foundational shifts, the changes to how search actually
Well,
works.
absolutely. It's been quite the journey.
Yeah, and now we're at, I think, the most fascinating part, really, like how AI is actually changing the psychology of search, like how people are actually using it, how they think about it, how they use it, in their daily lives, and I think for anyone who's really serious about succeeding online, whether you're, an SEO pro or a website owner or maybe even a marketing exec, understanding this stuff, it's not just a nice to have anymore, is it? I mean, it's essential.
I couldn't agree more. This final analysis we're going to do, it's not just looking at, surface level changes like, oh, the algorithm changed again. It's about going deeper,
Mm,
to really examine how human behavior, like how people look for information, how that's being transformed by AI. And the goal here really is to give you a framework,
hmm.
something you can use to adapt your strategies in this new world of search, this new landscape.
Right, right. And to get started with that, I think it helps to go back to the basics for a minute. Remember how search engines used to work? I mean, it was all about, retrieving documents. You typed in a query and, the search engine, it would go and fetch a list of web pages, ranked in some order of relevance, which, on the surface, that seems to make sense, right?
Uh,
But when you look at it from the perspective of what people are actually trying to do when they search, well, it starts to break down a bit, doesn't it? Because, I mean, as we've seen in Doran's work, people aren't really looking for documents, are they?
no, they're not. They want answers, solutions, insights, you know? They don't want to wade through a ton of links and piece together information from all over the place. That takes effort. It creates friction.
Right, exactly. Cognitive friction. And that's what search engines have been trying to eliminate all along, haven't they? Like every step of the way, it's been about making things easier, smoother, less effort for the user.
Precisely.
And we can actually see that evolution, can't we? Like, think back to the early days of the web. It was pretty basic, right? Just, retrieving those documents like we talked about.
Right. Very basic.
Then we started getting universal search, didn't we? Like the results would include, images, videos, news articles, different formats all mixed together.
Mm-hmm. And then came the knowledge graph.
Oh yeah, the knowledge graph, that was a big one. And featured snippets, suddenly the answers were starting to appear right there in the search results. You didn't even have to click.
Right, right. And then, of course, we had the rise of mobile and voice search.
Yeah, people searching on their phones, using their voices, and that just pushed things even further in that direction of, instant answers, less effort. And now here we are, right? Yeah. With AI generating those answers. Sometimes it feels like you don't even need to visit a website anymore.
Exactly, the zero-click search.
Right, the zero-click search. And this is where Doran's insights get really, really interesting, I think. Because, he connects this whole evolution of search to some really fundamental principles of psychology. I mean, take John Sweller's cognitive load theory, for example.
Right, Sweller's theory. It's about how our working memory has limited capacity. And what search engines are doing, especially with these AI-generated answers, is they're taking on some of that cognitive processing. They're reducing the load on our brains. Yeah. So if you're creating content, if you want your content to be the source of those AI answers, you have to make it easy for the AI to understand.
Yeah, yeah. And that ties in perfectly with information foraging theory, right? Which says, basically, people are always looking for the most efficient way to get information. They want the biggest reward for the least effort.
Exactly, a cost-benefit analysis. And when search engines offer a low-cost, low-effort way to get information, well, people are going to take it. They're going to favor that path, the path of least resistance. And increasingly, that path is the zero-click result.
Right. And then there's Herbert Simon, who talked about satisficing behavior. The idea that people will often settle for a good enough solution, especially if finding the absolute best solution requires a lot of extra effort.
Right, the good enough threshold. And AI-generated answers, they often meet that threshold.
Yeah.
They're good enough that people don't feel the need to dig any deeper. And that's a real challenge for content creators, right? Like, how do you get people to explore your content when they already have a good enough answer right there in front of them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's why all those traditional SEO tactics, the ones that were all about driving clicks to your website, they're just not as effective anymore, because the click, it used to be this essential step in the information retrieval process. But now, as that process becomes more streamlined, more AI-driven, the click itself is losing its importance.
Absolutely. And that's why we see this growing disconnect between the traditional metrics of online success, like website traffic, and the actual business results.
Right. So it's not just about getting people to your website anymore. It's about influencing the entire information ecosystem. Making sure your brand is visible, is authoritative, even if people aren't clicking through to your website.
Precisely.
And this brings us to another really key concept, the attention economy, which I have to say, Herbert Simon was pretty spot on back in 1971 when he talked about information abundance leading to a scarcity of attention.
Yeah, he really nailed it. I mean, we're drowning in information these days, aren't we?
We are, and attention, that's the real scarce resource.
Absolutely. Every click, every scroll, every moment spent looking at something, that's a deliberate allocation of this limited cognitive resource. And people are becoming more and more selective about where they direct their attention. So capturing that attention, holding on to it, even within the SRP itself, that's becoming absolutely crucial.
It is. And it also explains why, even if your content is perfectly optimized, you've done all the SEO right, you might still not be seeing the traffic you expect because maybe people are finding your information, but they're consuming it right there in the search results. They're not clicking through to your website.
That's right. It's not that you're invisible. It's that the information is being consumed in a different way.
Right. In a way that doesn't necessarily translate into those traditional metrics. And it's because, the search engine results page, it's not just a list of links anymore. It's a battleground for attention. It's like an attention marketplace, isn't it?
It is. You've got AI overviews, featured snippets, knowledge panels, the people also ask section, and of course the traditional organic listings. Plus all of the shopping features, local business packs, and all that. It's a crowded space.
And they're all competing for a slice of the same pie, the user's attention. Which means the more attention goes to one of these features, the less attention is left for the others.
Exactly. It's a zero-sum game.
And so for anyone who's serious about succeeding online, the goal has to be, being visible across as many of those SRP features as possible. Whether that means, being the source for the AI answers or getting your content featured in those snippets or having a strong presence in the knowledge panel, even if it doesn't always lead to a click to your website.
Precisely. It's about influence.
Right.
It's about being the source, the authority, the go-to resource.
Right. And this whole shift in how search works, it's not just about algorithms getting better at matching keywords. It's about something much more profound. It's about search engines actually starting to understand, to really grasp meaning. And a lot of that is because of the advancements in large language models.
Absolutely. LLMs have been a game changer.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand the difference, right? Like traditional search engines, even the ones that use advanced algorithms like BERT.
Right, BERT, the bidirectional encoder representations from transformers.
Right, or MUM, the multitask unified model.
Uh-huh.
Those were still primarily focused on pattern recognition, weren't they? Like they were really good at identifying relationships between words, understanding context, but they weren't actually generating responses, were they?
No. They were recognizing patterns, but not creating new information.
Right, right. And that's what LLMs can do. I mean, they can understand a user's intent, even if it's not explicitly stated. They can synthesize information from multiple sources and create completely new responses that are coherent and make sense. And they can even adjust the complexity of their explanations based on how much they think the user already knows.
Exactly. It's a completely different level of capability. It's not just finding information anymore. It's explaining it. It's teaching.
Right. And that means, we have to change how we think about content creation. Like, it's not just about keyword research anymore, is it? It's about intent research, understanding what the user is really trying to learn, what understanding they're seeking.
Absolutely. And the content that wins in this new world, it's the content that truly answers those underlying questions. It's the content that provides the complete, satisfying answer or solution. That's what AI is going to draw on. That's what's going to become the source material for those AI-generated responses.
Right, right. I mean, this is huge, isn't it? Like, this whole shift in search, it's not just about technology, it's about epistemology. It's about how we know what we know. It's about the nature of knowledge itself. And it's actually kind of scary when you think about it. I mean, it's like that allegory of the cave that Plato talked about.
It is. That's a really apt analogy.
Yeah, because you've got content creators, they're the ones out there in the world experiencing things, doing the research, generating the actual knowledge. They're like the people in Plato's cave seeing the real objects.
Right, the actual objects, not just the shadows.
Right, but then you've got the AI systems, and they're processing all this knowledge, synthesizing it, repackaging it. They're casting those shadows on the wall of the cave. And the users, they're often only seeing those shadows. They're getting this AI filtered version of reality.
And that raises some really important questions, doesn't it? Like, who controls the knowledge? Who
Yeah.
decides what gets shown, what gets hidden? And how do we know if what we're seeing is even true? Like, is it an accurate representation of reality, or is it just an AI's interpretation?
Exactly. And for content creators, it's like, how do you even stay relevant in this world? How do you make sure your expertise, your voice, your perspective, it doesn't get lost in all the noise?
Mm,
How do you make sure your content is the one that gets chosen, the one that the AI decides to highlight?
right.
It's about making sure your content stands out, not just to the algorithms, but to the AI systems as well.
Yeah, and I think that means, really focusing on things like structure, clarity, making sure your content is well organized, easy to understand,
Right.
and really emphasizing your expertise, being transparent about your credentials, your sources, your methodology.
Absolutely. It's about sending clear signals to the AI, telling it, hey, this is the real deal. This is the source you want to use. Right. And it's amazing how, like, even something like Newton's laws of motion, from physics, can help us understand how information flows in this digital world. I mean, Doran really brings all these different disciplines together, doesn't he?
He does. It's quite impressive.
Yeah. Like, take Newton's first law, the law of inertia. It says an object at rest tends to stay at rest. Right,
Unless
Guy?
acted upon by an external force.
Right, exactly. And it's the same with information. Like, if you just create content and leave it there, it's not going to go anywhere, is it? It's going to stay invisible.
No, it won't. It needs that external force to get it moving, to get it seen.
Right, right. And that force can be anything from, promoting your content on social media to building backlinks to, just constantly updating and refining your content to keep it fresh and relevant.
Precisely. You can't just set it and forget it. You have to keep pushing, keep engaging.
And then there's Newton's second law, which is, force equals mass times acceleration.
Yeah.
In Duran, he adapts this to say that the impact of your content, how much it actually influences things, is a function of its quality, how well it's distributed, and how much engagement it generates.
That's a really good way to think about it, because even if you have amazing content, the highest quality, if it's not seen by anyone, if it doesn't get distributed, if people don't engage with it, it's not going to have any impact.
Exactly. And that engagement, it's not just about getting clicks anymore. It's about, shares, comments, likes, all those signals that tell the algorithms and the AI systems, hey, this content is valuable. This is what people are interested in.
Absolutely.
And then, there's Newton's third law, which is about action and reaction.
For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right. And in the context of AI and search, it's like, as AI gets better at providing those quick, easy answers, as it becomes more prevalent, well, people are going to start to crave something more, aren't they? They're going to want those unique human-generated insights that AI can't provide. They're going to want depth, nuance, perspective.
They will. Because AI can synthesize information, but it can't truly understand it, can it? It can't provide that human touch, that spark of originality.
Exactly. And so it's like, as AI becomes more powerful, the value of human expertise actually increases. It becomes this scarce, valuable resource.
And that's the opportunity, right? For content creators, for businesses, for anyone who wants to stand out in this new world. It's about focusing on what AI can't do. It's about providing that human element, that depth of understanding, that unique perspective.
Absolutely. And it's about, recognizing that the old ways of measuring success online, those traditional SEO metrics,
Right.
they're just not enough anymore because they don't capture the full picture of what's happening in this new AI-driven world.
Right. We need a new framework, a new set of metrics to really understand how to succeed in this environment.
Exactly. And that's where search user optimization, or SEO, comes in. It's about moving beyond those old metrics, like traffic and clicks, and focusing on things that actually measure your influence in the search ecosystem.
Right. Metrics that reflect how people are actually using search and how AI is shaping those interactions.
Exactly. Like, one of the key SEO metrics is query diversity growth, which is basically, how many different search queries is your content showing up for?
Right. It's a measure of your content's breadth of relevance.
Exactly. And then there's impression to click gap analysis, which is looking at how much of your content is being consumed directly within the search results without people actually clicking through to your website.
Right, because like we were talking about earlier, even if people aren't clicking, they might still be getting value from your content. And that's important to track.
It is. And then, of course, you want to track your SRP feature presence. How often is your content showing up in featured snippets, knowledge panels, AI overviews, all those zero-click elements?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's a measure of your visibility in those high-value positions.
Right, right. And you also want to do intent-based performance segmentation, which is basically looking at, how well your content is performing for different types of search intent.
Right. Because different types of content will be more or less affected by zero-click searches.
Exactly. And then there's topic authority metrics, which is about, how comprehensive and authoritative is your content on a particular topic? Is it really the go-to resource?
Right. And then, of course, you still want to track things like page dwell time and engagement on your website.
Hmm.
Because even if you're getting fewer clicks, you still want to know how people are interacting with your content once they do arrive.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really a whole new way of thinking about SEO, isn't it?
It is. It's about moving beyond just driving traffic to your website and focusing on building a strong presence in the entire search ecosystem. It's about becoming the source, the authority, the go-to resource for your niche.
And to do that effectively, I think we need to understand some of the key psychological principles that are at play here. Like Dorn talks about the information asymmetry principle, which comes from economics. And it's basically the idea that, sometimes one party has more information than the other.
Right, and that can give them a significant advantage.
Exactly. And in the context of AI and search, it's like, AI is great at synthesizing information that's already out there, but it doesn't have access to unique, experiential, or proprietary knowledge, does it?
No, it doesn't. That's where humans have the edge.
Right, right. So if you want to stand out, if you want to create content that AI can't just replicate, you need to leverage that information asymmetry. You
Yeah,
need to focus on sharing insights, experiences, data that AI can't get anywhere else.
exactly. It's about being the source of unique, valuable information.
Right. And then there's the cognitive elevation principle, which draws on Bloom's taxonomy, that hierarchy of learning objectives. And it's basically the idea that, AI is getting really good at handling those lower level cognitive tasks, like remembering and understanding basic facts.
Uh-huh.
But humans, we want more than that, don't we? We want to analyze, we want to evaluate, we want to create, we want to reach those higher levels of understanding.
We do. We want insight, not just information.
Exactly. And so the content that's going to win in this new world, it's the content that helps people reach those higher levels of cognitive engagement. It's the content that explains the why behind the what, the content that provides that deeper level of analysis and insight.
Right. And then there's the trust differentiation principle,
Mm.
which is becoming more and more important as, AI starts to generate more and more content, because how do you know who to trust?
Exactly. It's like, how do you tell the real from the fake, the authoritative from the, just made up? And I think a big part of that is transparency, isn't it? Being clear about your credentials, your sources, your methodology.
Absolutely. And being willing to acknowledge limitations or
Even
uncertainties. Not pretending to have all the answers,
Mm.
because that actually builds trust.
It does, because it shows you're being honest
Yeah.
and that you're not just trying to sell something. And then there's the experience value principle, which is the idea that, as economies evolve, people are increasingly looking for experiences, not just products or
I
services.
want something more than just information.
Yeah, they want to be engaged, they want to be entertained, they want to feel something. And
Yeah.
that's something that AI can't really provide, can it?
Not in the same way that humans can.
Exactly. So if you want to create content that's truly valuable, that can't be easily replaced by AI, you need to think about how to create an experience for your users, whether that's through interactive tools, personalized content, or, just really focusing on storytelling and emotional connection.
Absolutely. It's about making your content memorable, engaging, and something that people want to come back to.
Right, right. And I think it's important to remember that content, it's not static. It's not like you create it once and then it's done.
No, it's not. It's
Uh,
constantly evolving. It's subject to entropy.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like in physics, entropy is a measure of disorder or randomness. And in the context of information, it's like, over time, content can become outdated, irrelevant, or just lost in the noise.
Exactly. And that's why we need a strategy for managing that entropy, a way to keep our content fresh, relevant, and visible.
And that's where the IDOS framework comes in, right? Entropy-informed digital optimization strategy.
Right. It's about systematically managing the life cycle of our content.
Yeah. And that means, regularly evaluating your content, making sure it's still aligned with user intent, updating it with fresh data and insights, and also thinking about how to structure your content so it's easy for AI systems to understand and use.
Exactly, because if AI can understand your content, it's more likely to surface it in those zero-click
Yeah.
results. And finally, it's about creating content that AI can't just synthesize or replicate. Content that has that unique human element that we were talking about earlier.
Right, right. So it's really a holistic approach to content strategy, isn't it?
It is. It's about thinking about content from every angle, from the user's perspective, from the AI's perspective, and from the perspective of how information flows and evolves over time.
Exactly. And when it comes to actually implementing these SEO strategies, I think there are a few key things to keep in mind. Like one is, instead of just focusing on optimizing for specific keywords, you need to think about optimizing for intent. Understanding the user's entire problem-solving journey and creating content that addresses every stage of that journey.
Right. It's about providing comprehensive, helpful resources that answer all the user's questions, not just one specific query.
Exactly. And that means, instead of having a bunch of short, fragmented pieces of content, you might want to consolidate those into longer, more in-depth guides.
Right. One-stop resources that cover a topic comprehensively.
Exactly. And then structured data is becoming more and more important.
It is, because it helps search engines and AI systems understand the relationships between different entities and concepts in your content.
Right. And that means using schema markup to tag your content with, information about what it's about, who created it, when it was updated, all that stuff.
Absolutely. And you also want to make sure you're sending strong authority and trust signals. Things like author bios, citations, clear update timestamps, all those things that help build credibility and trust with both users and AI systems.
Right, right. And finally, I think it's important to remember that, people are emotional creatures. And even though AI is getting better at understanding language, it still doesn't really understand emotions, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So I think there's a real opportunity for content creators to connect with users on an emotional level, to tell stories, to evoke feelings, to create content that resonates on a deeper level.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Because ultimately, people remember how something made them feel, not just the facts that they learned.
Right. And all of these different SEO strategies, they're not just separate tactics, are they? They're all interconnected.
No, they're not. They work together. They amplify each other.
Exactly. Like if you're optimizing for intent, that's going to make your content more authoritative. And if you're using structured data, that's going to help AI understand your content better and surface it in more relevant ways. And if you're creating comprehensive resources, that's going to give you that information asymmetry advantage that we were talking about. So it's really a whole system, isn't it?
It is. And as we move further into this AI-driven world, I think we're going to see the development of even more sophisticated tools and systems for tracking and measuring content influence.
Right. Like, impression attribution analysis, which is about understanding which pieces of content are driving brand impressions, even if they're not getting direct clicks. Or content contribution scoring, which is about assigning value to content based on how it contributes to the overall information ecosystem. Or authority flow mapping, which is about visualizing how authority and trust signals flow through your content.
Exactly. And predictive influence modeling, which is about using data to predict the likely impact of your content before you even publish it.
Right. And intent satisfaction analysis, which is about measuring how well your content is actually meeting users' needs, regardless of whether they click through to your website or not.
Right. It's about moving beyond just vanity metrics and really understanding how your content is impacting the world.
Exactly. And I think at the end of the day, as powerful as AI is becoming, it still can't replace human wisdom, can it?
No, it
Yeah.
can't. That's our unique advantage.
Yeah. AI can process data, it can understand information, it can even generate knowledge. But wisdom, that's about judgment, it's about values, it's about understanding the nuances and complexities of the world. And that's something that only humans can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so in this new world of AI-driven search, our role as content creators, as marketers, as humans is more important than ever. It's about being the source of that wisdom, that insight, that human connection.
Exactly. And it's about understanding that as search becomes more AI-driven, the human element becomes even more crucial. It's the strange paradox, isn't it?
It is.
And it means that, SEO professionals, they're becoming like psychological interpreters,
Yeah.
content creators, they're becoming insight generators.
Mm.
And marketing executives are starting to realize that influence is more valuable than just traffic.
A whole new world, isn't it?
It is. And I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that in the zero-click era, the most important readers of your content might actually be AI systems.
That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah, because they're the ones who are going to decide what gets seen, what gets amplified, what gets shared. And so if you want to succeed in this new world, you need to learn how to write for AI as well as for humans. You need to understand how AI thinks, how it processes information, how it makes decisions. Because the future of search, it belongs to those who can master the art of collaborating with AI.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for our deep dive into the psychology of AI and search. Thanks for joining us. I think it's been a really enlightening journey.
It has.
Yeah, and I hope you found it as valuable as I have.
Me too.
All right, until next time.
Take care.